edition of Law Accent Facebook Live program to assist you to be grounded in the knowledge of law and how it applies to your business. So today I'm going to be discussing a very interesting topic. It's titled Revisiting the Executive Order for Ease of Doing Business in Nigeria. So this applies not just to you if you are an entrepreneur in Nigeria doing business, not just to you as a company that is also doing business, but also to you as an investor wanting to come into the Nigerian climate to do your business. So there are areas I'm going to be looking at in this session today. The first thing I want to talk about from the executive order has to do with the executive order itself. I will try to give a background of why the executive order was made by the office of the presidency. Then the second thing I'm going to be doing is to give snippets of key areas of the order that you can use for your competitive advantage in business. Then the third thing I'm going to be doing is to look at the windows of opportunities created by the executive orders. And finally, we are going to be looking at how to compel the ministries, departments, and agencies of the government in enforcing this order. Are you ready for this? So let's move to the first. Okay, so what's the executive order about? The first thing you should know about the order is the fact that it is an attempt to remove bottlenecks from different ministries, departments, and agencies of the government. Then it also, makes way for transparency of transactions and all of that. Don't forget, the key thing, the key element of this order, why this order was introduced really, was to enable for ease of doing business in Nigeria. So these are very important things that had to follow the executive order. So number one, there was a need to remove a whole lot of bottlenecks in dealing with agencies of the government, and then also the need to ensure that there is transparency in government transactions, because eventually these are standards, these are tests that would hit ranking in the global space. And so you might agree with me at the end of this session if the government really, by reason of this order, met what they sought to do. So let's move to the snippets. The first thing in the snippets is the part of the order that talks about the fact that every ministry, department, and agency of the government must be able to make accessible any form of requirement for any form of services that has to be procured from them. So accessibility now means that anything you want to do, you should have access to any form of services, the requirements and all of that. You should be able to access those requirements, whether it is through the web, online, or a conspicuous place within the office of the ministry, department, or government agency that you are dealing with. So maybe I should pause to ask you a question, really, whether this was brought 2017, whether you have been exploring that opportunity to actually check online, to visit ministries, departments, or agency you are dealing with to really request for those requirements. And just in case you saw that kind of difference, you will find that that is as a result of this order that we are talking about today. Then another thing based on the point for accessibility is the fact that where there is a form of conflict, So let's say that I do not want to mention any ministry now, okay? But let's just say you were dealing with a ministry, for instance, and you found that the requirements that they stipulated had some conflict with maybe what they were requesting for. Yes, you can compel them based on the requirements that were stipulated online or within their office space. So this is one interesting thing that I actually don't want you to forget. So let's move to the next. The next point is the need to communicate approval or disapproval. And this communication must be done through at least two means as stated by the order. So the first means is by email and the second means is by website. So you will find that by reason of this order, any government agency that you are dealing with is expected to at least have a website. It's a minimum requirement, else they will be violating the provision, the implied provision of the ease of doing business order. So if let's say you made an application for visa entry to Nigeria, for instance, and you found that your application maybe was denied, there must be a reason. A reason must be communicated, because it is based on that you know why and you know what to do if it is a situation that you can remedy. So that's a fantastic one, if you ask me. Then another point is what I choose to call deemed approval. Now, what is deemed approval about? So let's assume, for instance, that under the requirements and all of that, the ministry had mentioned that your application is going to be approved or disapproved within 48 hours. If that is not done within 48 hours, this order is saying that you can deem it as being approved, and that is what the order has also provided for. Do you consider that to be fantastic? So let's move on to the next. Then another point you should also note is maybe situation where you are dealing with two or more agencies of the government at the same time. So for instance, what happens if there's a need for you to supply, let's say, your birth certificate in two or different agencies, ministries or departments of the government, and perhaps you were asked to submit your original? What happens? Now, you would agree with me that this kind of situation actually hampers speed of getting your job done. But what this order has done now is to shift the burden of seeking for the original away from you, so that it is the other ministry or department or agencies that have the duty to follow up with the agency where the original was supplied. So that means, for instance, that if you, let's say you're dealing with two agencies together at the same time, and one of the agencies is in custody of some material documents that you need to process certain things, and you need that document in the other agency, you, by reason of this order, you can tender the photocopy, and then it becomes the duty of the other agency to follow up and actually get the just get a form of acknowledgement that the original is in their custody. Let's see the next point that we have here. So now let's talk about dealing in imports and exports. The interesting thing that this order has also done is to ensure that there is a form of all ministries, departments, and agencies of the government. There is a concession, there is a form of coming together of all these agencies within the port. So it becomes like a one-stop center where you don't have to jump from one office to the other. Let's say one of the offices is in maybe junction A, the other is in junction B, and all of that. And that could be very stressful. I think the federal government, by reason of this order, is now saying, look, let everybody, let all our ministries, departments, and agencies, let them come together within a spot so that it becomes like a one-stop center where you could process everything that you need to process. And I think that's actually fantastic because over time, we've seen situation of businesses that needed to be expedited for maybe eventually refuse to go through because of the bottlenecks and all of that. For me, I actually consider this interesting, and I hope you actually do too. So let's move to the next point here. Okay, so another point that is of very, very high importance has to do with those in the agribusiness sector. By this order, you have a leverage in the sense that you have a specialized export terminal for you to be able to deal on all your products to be shipped out of the country. So if you are an investor watching this space, or perhaps you are an agribusiness entrepreneur, I'm sure that you would find this interesting. And if I were you, the next thing I would do is to really go online and check the agencies, the ministries, the departments that have things to do with exportation as it relates to my line of business, because it is one of the requirements that they would have their conditions, they would have everything relating to how you should process all of these things online. And as a benefit of doubt, you could also try to check them at their offices because it's now open to you by reason of this order. So that's a tip if you are in the agribusiness sector. Then finally under this is the order, the instruction for ports to be open for 24 hours transaction. And I think it's a very wonderful initiative, especially regarding Apapa Port. Very beautiful, very wonderful. That means if the port is open 24 hours, you can do your business 24 hours. So you can also take advantage of that. Now let's move to the next point, automation of company registration. You would agree with me so far that most of these snippets, they focus so much on the port, the Corporate Affairs Commission, and to an extent, by implication, other ministries and agencies, even though it's a coverage, it's a cover that it applies to all of these agencies. But you find that interestingly, there are targeted provisions relating to specific agencies of the government. Now, for me, I found that this was actually targeted at the Corporate Affairs Commission. So there is an instruction for their processes to be automated. This simply means that all registrations, particularly pre-incorporation applications, as much as possible, they have to be automated. And you would agree with me, without any element of bias for the system, that a whole lot has been done at the Corporate Affairs Commission. And these days we find people being able to register their businesses themselves. We find even the commission going out and sensitizing people on how to deal on their platform. All of those things you see are as a result of the ease of doing business order. And I find it interesting. So what government has said is there has to be an automation of the process, which has been ongoing. Then the next point has to do with visa processing for tourists and investors. By this order, the necessary agency needs to ensure that for this class of people, the application is treated within 48 hours. So if they are going to be rejected, if it's going to be approved, it has to be within 48 hours. And it may interest you that recently the federal government, brought out a national visa policy document by which they also try to narrow down a whole lot of things to aid ease of doing business in Nigeria. You can actually look out for that session where we'll still get to talk about how that policy affects entity, or how it affects you as an investor or a tourist seeking to come into Nigeria. So that's also very interesting, and I hope that if you are there watching us and you're seeking to come into the space to do business, now this makes a whole lot of sense. And one key point from that new initiative is that you can do your processing, just preliminary processing online, while upon arrival you can actually get your visa on arrival. So this is quite laudable for the federal government. And if you are there watching us live and you need to check this, you can check, just go on your browsing handle and check immigration.gov.ng. I will repeat that again, immigration.gov.ng. You will find it interesting what the government is doing. Now, the other point that, okay, so now let's move to the next point that we have. What are the windows of opportunities opened up by reason of this executive order? Is something that we should all pay attention to, because I've always been a firm believer of the fact that you cannot enforce a right that you do not know of. And this is one of the things that we are trying to work on in the business space within Nigeria, to sensitize people to know their rights and be able to implement those things. So I would really encourage you, let's be a part of this together. Put in your question there if you're watching us live, and if you see this much later too, feel free to put in your question in the comment box. So the first thing I want you to know from the question, the windows of opportunities that this has brought, the first thing is many MDAs now have online. So there is no hiding of information on know-how, how to do, how to apply, how to process things. If you can create the time to do your thing, you can check online, you'll find a whole lot of information. Believe me, you find a whole lot of information that would even amaze you. So there are a whole lot of information out there. It's the first thing I need you to know. Then the second thing is the speed of processing services. Before this initiative, although now I'm giving an example of the Corporate Affairs Commission. Before this initiative, your application could even take up to 60 days for you to get name approved alone, especially in the days of the filling of paper. But these days, you can register your company within 3 days, and even lesser. This, for me, is an interesting thing. So speed in doing business. The next thing has to do with the exportation business line. You'll find that now it's easier to deal on exportation, especially when you know the requirements and all of that. It's very easy, very straightforward. It's a one-stop thing, and you shouldn't really be hampered in any way. So it's a line of opportunity for you if you're thinking of what can you start as a business, or what can you invest your money in. If you can create the time to master the legal framework for that sector, I'm sure that you will do very well especially adding it with the mastery of what we are discussing today. Now, the next thing is generally there is more of agribusiness opportunities now. You find that government has been doing a whole lot. Just recently, the the Finance Act was introduced. In one of those key things that act also there is the provision for tax holiday for those in agri-business. So you can also take advantage of that. We see that this government has been doing a whole lot in giving incentives in the agribusiness space. So it's something that you may want to do further research on and see how you can take advantage of. Then something that is not directly now, but indirectly also of importance, benefit, is the fact that under the new Finance Act, for instance, you cannot operate a bank account if you do not have what is called tax identification number. And under this executive order, for you to, after your company registration and all of that, that you still need your TIN to open an account and all of that. Now, what this executive order has helped with is the fact that MDAs now synergize internally. So unlike before, when you get your CAC certificate, you then move from that desk, you move to FIRS, which is Federal Inland Revenue Board. From there, you start processing things. But these days, there is a process, there's an automation process whereby even when you receive your certificate, it is in CAC itself, the Corporate Affairs Commission, that will transmit your records to the FIRS, and the FIRS will generate automatically your tax identification number. So you may want to ask me the question, you don't have a tax number, even though you did your company registration recently. Now the solution is this: if you could do a mail to helpdesk@firs.gov.ng, I'll repeat that again, helpdesk@firs.gov.ng. You do them a mail making reference to your company name when it was registered, the RC number, or whichever number as the case may be, your phone number, your email, and possibly the office address. If you do them all of those, if you give them those details, you can be rest assured that most likely they would respond to your mail giving your TIN. So isn't that interesting? You should take advantage of that as well. Then recently too, you would have noticed that there are feedback mechanisms here and there. Now, what I'm going to do is I will give you two of those feedback mechanisms that we have found works very effectively. If you have any issue with the port authorities, you can have your feedback mechanism check pssp.ng. I'll repeat that again, pssp.ng. You can check them. You will find a feedback process there. Very effective guys on board, and I believe it will work. Now, the second one is a general one. If there is any form of feedback, any form of complaint, or any other thing, maybe you just want to appreciate the ongoing transformation and all of that, you could check report gov, report spelled report.gov.ng. Fantastic work going on there as well. You could log on to make your complaints, to make your recommendations. You could do a whole lot of things when you get on board. So the next thing, which is where we'll draw the curtain for this session. The final thing we are discussing is how to compel MDAs. MDAs means ministries, departments, agencies, whichever one you're dealing with, how to compel them to implement executive orders. The first point we have now, I'm going to be sharing 2 points with you, and these points are highly effective now that you have a hint of what your rights are and what the obligations of the ministries, departments, and agencies of government are under the executive order for ease of doing business. I'll give you 2 PowerPoints, and I believe that they will make a whole lot of sense when you put in effort to do them. Although I've given a hint already when I mentioned the feedback mechanisms, so you should really explore those feedback mechanisms. And the last hint I want to drop is for you to be bold enough to file action to compel any agency of the government you are dealing with to obey, to comply with the provisions of the executive order for ease of doing business. You might agree with me that a whole lot is contained in that order, and as much as possible, it's still in black and white until you and I make it active. And how we can make it to become an active order is by ensuring that we put those that the orders apply to, we put them on the spot and make them accountable to follow the provisions of the order. And once you join in doing this, I believe that Nigeria is going to be better for it, and we are going to have an environment that makes a whole lot of sense to investors to invest in. Thank you for this session. I will look forward to having another session with you some other time. Thank you. Awesome.